welcome back to another video. And before we get into today's video, I just want to do the usual. So my name's Amber. I upload beauty and true crime content. If they're the type of videos that you like to watch, then why not hit that subscribe button and come along and join our little family. And if you're already part of the family, then make sure that notification bell switched on just so you're notified of whenever I upload a video. Why not give me a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. And now we can get into today's case. I am back at you with another True Crime Tuesday, and today's case is another interesting family case. But before we get into the case, I always like to do a quick disclaimer at the beginning of all of these videos, just to mention that this video does contain adult references. If you are not into that sort of thing, obviously we're going to be discussing a crime, that is fine. Just completely click off this video, go over to my channel. There's lots of other videos on there that you will find more suitable, but otherwise, then let's get into the case. So today's case is actually a family murder that took place in 1968, and it is the Robinsons family murders, or they're also known as the Hart murders. This case is sort of solved, but officially remains an unsolved case. So in summer 1968, the worst mass murder in Michigan's history took place in the quiet lakeside community of Hart. Richard Robinson, his wife Shirley, and their 4 children intended to spend their entire summer at their seasonal family home. Richard Robinson was a successful 42-year-old man. He was an advertising executive who owned a magazine called Impresario. His wife Shirley Robinson was a 40-year-old housewife. They had 4 children: 19-year-old Richie, 16-year-old Gary, 12-year-old Randall, and a 7-year-old girl named Susan. All of the children had enjoyed a stable and privileged upbringing. The Robinson family travelled to their summer home in the Blisswood Resort community. The home was a beautiful log cabin which sat on the shore of Lake Michigan in the north of the woods. It was secluded among tall pines and dense woods. The cabin was nearly impossible to see from the road, and it was very well hidden, so it was one of those places that unless you knew about it, you probably wouldn't know it was there. So only weeks into their family holiday, a bullet shattered the glass window in their cabin. 4 more shots were fired through the rear window from a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle, which was seemingly aimed at Richard Robinson, the father of the family. The murderer then entered the cabin through an unlocked door, and he killed the remaining family members with shots to the head from a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Susan and Richard, so Susan was the daughter and Richard the father, were also bludgeoned with a hammer which was found at the scene. Shirley's body, the mother, was intentionally paused, so when the crime scene was discovered, it would lead police to believe there had been a sexual attack. Bloody footprints on the floor led investigators to conclude that one person committed the murders. The bodies were found on July 22nd in 1968. This was 27 days after the family had been killed. Some women were actually gathered in a nearby cottage, and they were having a bridge party, and they began to smell something rotten, something that just didn't smell right. So they believed that it was something that the smell was coming from a nearby cabin, so they phoned the caretaker Monty Bliss to go and take a look. When he did, he actually discovered all 6 of the Robinsons family members' dead bodies. Pathologists were able to estimate from the condition of the bodies that they had been killed 4 weeks prior to their discovery, which placed the date of the Robinsons family murder in or around June. Police set out to find a motive as to why the family may have been targeted, and to whether anyone associated with them may have had any reason to want the family dead. Police suspected the main target of the murder was the father of the family, Richard Robinson, and if he was the target, why did the killer go on and kill the entire family? So Richard Robinson was known simply as a wealthy father and husband. However, there has been suggestions over the years that his business was maybe involved in some dodgy dealings, some shady underhand things were supposedly going on, and these dodgy dealings were supposedly not in his client's favour, so they weren't necessarily in his client's best interest, and there were more to actually favour himself. There was also known to be apparent liaisons with secretaries that worked at the company, and there was a possible background of mental illness. Although it's difficult to know how substantiated these reports are, this case is an older case, and back in those days, obviously policing wasn't where it is now. They didn't have as much technology back then. Because it's an old case, over the years you do get a little bit of hearsay, so just take that with a pinch of salt. So by the second week of the investigation, Michigan State Police suspected a guy who was Richard's employee, and he was named Joseph Scolaro III, and he was aged 30. He had not been seen or heard from for more than 12 hours on the day of the murders, and his alibis for that time all proved to be invalid. He had also purchased both of the murder weapons determined by police through forensic testing that had been used in the Robinsons' family murders. Specifically, there was a 25 caliber Jetfire automatic Beretta pistol, and there was also a 22 caliber AR-7 Armalite semi-automatic rifle. The 4 22 caliber spent shells found at the murder cabin scene were forensically compared by their ballistic markings to several 22 caliber evidence shells known to have been fired by Joe at a family firing range in 1967, at which time Joe used his missing 22 caliber Armalite rifle. The 2 shots of shells were found to be an exact match, and although Joe claimed to have given this weapon away, a neighbour had told the police that he'd seen the 22 caliber AR-7 rifle in Joe's house not long before the Robinsons had been killed. Joe's missing 25 caliber Beretta automatic pistol, which he also claimed to police to have given away prior to the June 1968 murders, was matched forensically in similar class characteristics to the second identical 25 caliber Beretta pistol that he had produced for police a day after the bodies were found in Hart. Both guns had been purchased by Joe on the same day, February 2nd, 1968. Also found at the murder scene were several Seiko 25 caliber spent cartridges, a rare 1968 finish brand sold only for a limited time of a few weeks in Michigan, January through to February 1968. Prior to the murders. It was documented by investigators. One of the ammunition purchasers of this Seiko ammunition had actually been Joe on February 2nd, 1968. Joe's statements that he had given away both of the missing murder weapons and the Seiko ammunition prior to the June 25th killings also proved invalid. They were one more part of his elaborate scheme to obstruct the investigation of the crime. During the lengthy murder investigation, it was determined by a forensic accountant that more than $60,000 was missing from 2 combined businesses that were owned by Richard Robinson. The 2 Robinson businesses had been left in the care of Joe prior to the murders. Police thought Richard Robinson had found out about the fraud and betrayal in a phone call that they had that day while the family were away at the cabin. Evidence found multiple phone calls between Richard and Joe on the morning of the family's murders. The theory was that Joe had driven out to the cabin and killed the family before Richard could take action about his embezzlement. It is believed from the time of the last phone call between the 2, Joe had enough time to drive from Detroit to Hart and carry out the murders. He did not have a solid alibi for that time to account for his movements. Joe said that he was at a plumbing convention and spoke with a number of clients on that day. However, no one remembers seeing him or can provide statements to back up his claims. At the murder scene, police found shell casings and a bloody footprint that were sure to have been left by the killer. A pair of brand new shoes were found in Joe's possession which matched the shoe print left at the scene. However, the shoes were clean and had never been worn, meaning the police could not prove that the shoes were a match. Joe was also one of the few people in the world that could find the Robinsons' remote family cabin because he'd been there before. It was also revealed that there was a £200,000 Keyman life insurance that had been taken out recently on his boss, but he wasn't aware that the policy had not yet gone into effect because Richard Robinson had not yet took the required physical to allow the policy to go ahead. A forensic audit of the Robinsons' companies found that the money had started draining from the business only after Joe was hired. The 2 investigating police agencies involved in the case presented their combined evidence case report to jurisdictional prosecution on December 17th in 1969. They implicated Joe as a sole perpetrator of the mass murder crime. In mid-January 1970, Emmett County prosecutor Donald C. Noggle decided not to bring charges against Joe, citing the 2 missing murder weapons and the absence of his fingerprints from the scene as the reason why. During the course of the investigation, Joe failed 2 lie detector tests. A 3rd test was judged inconclusive as to the truth. It was also noted that he tried to deceive the polygraph interviewers in his pre-test interviews. 4 years later, a newly elected chief prosecutor in Oakland County believed the Robinson crime had originated within the jurisdiction and reopened the case for prosecution. When the prime suspect Joe learned of the impending charges and arrest, he actually committed suicide on March 8th in 1973. Joe left behind a typewritten note in which he said, quote, "I am a liar, a cheat, a phony," and he also left a list of people that he'd swindled out of money in multiple business schemes. He then added a handwritten note to his mother on the same paper saying, quote, "I had nothing to do with the Robinsons. I'm a liar but not a murderer. I am sick and I am scared. God and everyone, please forgive me." Since Michigan law did not permit an open murder case to be officially closed, the suicide of the prime suspect, Joe, placed the case in an inactive case file. Thus, many questions remained unanswered over many years. Other crime theories have surfaced today, but none have been substantiated. Those who personally knew Mr. Robinson were quoted in 2 police reports filed on the case as saying they'd never known a better man, a friend or a business partner. Due to the brutality of the murders, the cabin was torn down. For 5 decades, the land where the Robinsons' cabin once stood laid vacant. Shortly after the murders, a family purchased the property and kept it untouched, almost as though it was a memorial to the family. Here's for my thoughts and feelings. I think this case has been unofficially solved. But I don't think, obviously, they can officially solve it, and I don't think it will ever be officially solved because they can't ask Joe what actually, they can't prosecute Joe now. He's committed suicide. I just find it very strange how he lived for several years after the murders, going along his normal life, everything was fine, and then as soon as he finds out the case is reopened and that he might get arrested and be prosecuted, he decides to commit suicide. Now, I might be completely wrong, and this guy might have just been really struggling, and he might, you know, his demons might have got the best of him in terms of the other things that he'd done in his life that he knew were wrong. But I just feel like it's too much of a coincidence that he'd lived his life for so many years fine, and then as soon as there's a threat of arrest, he's like, right, I need to go. And you know, he's gonna claim his innocence. You're not gonna want to would you want to admit to killing a full family? Like, would anyone? You don't want people to remember you like that. I just suspect that there was something. I don't think that the one thing I will say is I don't necessarily think that Richard Robinson was shady in any way, shape or form. I think it was more that Joe, entering the business, was doing shady dealings himself. I don't think it involved Mr. Robinson or the family, and he has always been known, like, he's been the only real suspect surrounding the case. So for me, it's sort of solid that he was the murderer. Now, if he wasn't, I do apologise, but for me, that's where the evidence points. Now, I would love to know your thoughts and feelings on this case. Please let me know that down below, and I shall see you in the next video. Mwah, thanks so much for watching.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy